Welcome, everybody, and thanks for tuning in today and listening. My name is Caleb Sisk, and I'm joined by Dowden. We are part of the Vols on SI staff. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the Tennessee versus Georgia game, so we thought we'd hop on and discuss a few points of emphasis on this upcoming game. The biggest question is this game even winnable for the Tennessee Volunteers? To start, I'll pass it off to Dale for his first thoughts.
Yeah, the game definitely feels probably more winnable this year, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But both teams have young quarterbacks um, who you almost would want to. It is one of, you can kind of split hairs. You almost want to say that Joey could potentially have, the biggest support with it being a home game. Then you flip over to Georgia to where they may be stronger than Tennessee and certain other weapons on the offensive side. That does give Gunner Stockton a bit more of a security blanket. But the big thing I think this is a very winnable. I won't say very winnable, but it is a winnable game for Tennessee versus 2 or 3 months ago. Most people would have probably wrote this game off, as a loss. A lot of people, being the typical fan, seeing that would appear to be Georgia struggling with their first two opponents, with at least this last one with was it Arkansas State they played, had the weather delay, or Austin P. They pulled away in the second half. But, we've kind of seen that from Georgia even last year. They had a few games where they probably didn't look the hottest. They found a way to win. Kind of give fans the mindset that they could go to Athens and sneak a win, and then Georgia did what typical Georgia does. They ran the ball, smothered with defense, pulled out a win. This year, it being inside Neyland, Tennessee may have a little bit of an advantage with that standpoint. Um, but yeah, all in all, I think they have enough weapons offensively and playing with the kind of the more of a bend but don't break defense. You know, Still maybe a few things to go their way, but all in all, definitely a winnable game.
Yeah, man. I mean, by no means is this game just an easy win for either team. I mean, this game is always one of the ones that is marked on the calendar, especially for Tennessee. They want that revenge. They haven't been able to get it for quite some time. They're entering this game and they're going to be inside their home stadium, which always will play a factor. And having this just chip on your shoulder, especially how last year went. That game was supposed to be closer in everyone's
Yeah.
mind, and then it almost felt like Georgia just dominated pretty much for the whole game. I mean, just to touch on what you said a few months ago, I personally was already writing Tennessee off for this game. It almost seemed like, it was a win for the Georgia Bulldogs right away, and it was one of the games that I anticipated them to lose, and Tennessee would have to find some wiggle room around the Georgia game in order to be able to make a push for the playoffs yet again, after making their playoff appearance last year. But now it almost feels as if, this game is a little bit more tight than we thought it would be, which is not something that you typically see in this scenario. I mean, usually it almost seems like Georgia's always the favorite, but for once it almost seems like you can almost point the finger at Tennessee being the favorite. And there's a bunch of things that play a factor with that. And I think it just jumps back to how the teams have played to begin the season. Both teams have had their ups and downs. There's been a lot to like about Georgia. There's been a lot to like about Tennessee. And it almost feels more evenly matched up than usual, which I think also plays a factor for this. It's not something you typically see either. You don't really see these teams being very evenly matched, and that's down the depth that goes into cornerback depth, that goes into linebacker depth, that goes even to the quarterbacks and how that can play out, and that's definitely something that will be another talking point for us is for Tennessee to win, a lot is going to be on the shoulders of the QB, especially with a guy like Joey Aguilar. He has to do a lot of different things well in this game. So, what do you think he has to do in specific, Dell, to be able to pull off this win for the Tennessee Volunteers?
There's a couple of things I think that kind of go into that. One of them, and I'll get to. He doesn't have as much of a direct control over. One thing, we're going into week 3, and he has 0 turnovers. Be nice to keep that 0 intact. Take care of the football, take what the defense will give you. With saying that, I would also still say for the offense to legitimately probably have a shot to, put up points and move the ball to chase down a win. Not that they all have to be touchdowns, but I definitely think that throughout the game there needs to be probably at least 3 to 5 shots over the top, with a couple of them connecting, just to prove to the Georgia defense that you can go over the top. Because if you don't do that, Georgia is still who they are. If that ends up being the case, you could almost see another outcome of what we saw Hendon Hooker's last year. They went down with a high flying, passing attack, couldn't get anything going. And once Georgia realized they had Tennessee out of sync in the pass game, they just loaded the box and trusted their DBs to man up the receivers. And, the running game was definitely not going to be a factor. And it's kind of a little two-part situation. But going back to, Joey taking some shots and taking some deep balls, throughout the game, a lot of that's going to, that's going to be a 50-50 thing. The receivers have to be willing to go make plays, and execute on some of them. Georgia's not going to give you anything easy. There's going to be a lot of contested balls. But overall, just take care of the football. Take what the defense gives you. Take your shots, connect on a few, and see where the chips fall.
Exactly, and I mean, being able to take those deep shots, if that's something that can push the, secondary back, that would be huge, especially in quick games, something that Tennessee likes to utilize, and that's something that I definitely feel like Tennessee has to be able to do, and more specifically, a guy like Aguilar. One thing that I definitely noticed about Aguilar in the first 2 games is the fact that he's able to work through, quick progressions. He's
Mm-hmm.
just letting it rip very quick. Especially in quick game passes when it comes to screen passes or passes across the middle. That's something that I really felt like he did a good job on, is being able to just rip that football, get it to him, and hey, we're gonna talk over this later, whether it's a good pass or a bad one. Hey, he's working fast, which Georgia's fast. Tennessee has to be faster in this game when it comes to things like that, and I feel like that's going to be something that he has to be able to work through, and something that he needs to be able to do in order to kind of counter your points as well, because I feel like he's definitely got to be able to pass the ball deep, which ultimately would be able to almost, open up the short game, which if he can open up the short game, then there's really like a lot of different, packages they can factor in, especially when it comes to the tight ends. We've seen some early heavy sets of the tight ends, and that's something that I'm definitely a fan of when it comes to the college teams, is being able to factor in multiple different tight ends. And if you can work through quick game, I mean, man, the sky's the limit with using those guys as well. Which the talent they have around the tight end room it's second to none. It seems like you got guys like Ethan Davis and Miles Kitselman, and those guys, they're going to go ball. But just flipping it, and talking about Georgia and their quarterback, and he's got a very experienced cast around him. Tennessee's going to have to show up defensively. There's multiple different aspects in this game that I really feel like the Vols defense has to be able to do. And it starts with containing the quarterback. I feel like that's something that they have to do. They're going to have to contain Gunnar Stockton. They haven't really faced a running quarterback or a guy that likes to use his legs in the dual threat abilities that a guy like Gunnar Stockton has. So this is something that they haven't been able to see this year. You got a lot of new guys starting on this defense. A lot of guys, even the guys that they are starting, I would say a good majority of these guys have actually been able to show some upside against guys that use their legs more than others. But at the end of the day, when you have a guy as talented as Gunnar Stockton running the ball at the quarterback position, you already know he can sling it. He very well can sling it. But when he's able to use his legs, he's very dangerous, which is something that I feel like Tennessee's going to have to be able to stop. And that's definitely something that if Tennessee can stop, because they couldn't do it against Carson Beck, it seemed. It was like they couldn't buy themselves to get off the field, It was something that, if it's 3rd and long, Carson Beck has the opportunity to take it, he's going to take it, and he was getting it. And that's something that Tennessee really struggled against. And if they can really get off the field by containing a quarterback, spying the quarterback, I really feel like it gives especially the secondary more of a chance to work, and the secondary more of a chance to make plays. I think Tennessee just showing their confidence in the secondary is really positive and something to be proud of at this point if you're a Tennessee fan, and definitely something that I feel like they need to focus on. Dale, what's your thoughts on it? What do you think Tennessee, has to do to kind of complement their offense and, be able to help their offense out when it comes to the defensive side and containing this Georgia offense?
Well, I think the first thing you have to really take in consideration, Georgia will be on the road. So, and especially around kickoff, the crowd is going to be hostile. They're going to be very loud, very rowdy. One thing I would anticipate Kirby Smart doing is a combination of two things: establishing the run early, and also potentially getting Gunnar Stockton some play action passes, RPOs, or some short game stuff to kind of build his confidence. I could see them wanting to do that a bit early, to try to somewhat neutralize the crowd early, just to keep it being a huge factor. Because if the crowd does become, engaged like that, it'll definitely change up probably at least a little bit of their game plan, especially as far as snap counts and how they plan on doing that. Um, so I would anticipate there being an established run game, and I'm kind of intrigued to see how many design QB runs that may be called. Because that right there, Georgia's a running machine as it is already, with a stable of 2 or 3 backs, if not more, that are all capable of being a starter for multiple SEC Power 4 schools. And having all that in the backfield, if you have some design runs, you really change the numbers game. Because and that's one thing I think that kind of hurt Tennessee last year with what you referenced with Carson Beck. You get into those third and long situations, you spread the field out a little bit, and spread the defense, and you have a few guys going deep. You really open up some running lanes, and credit Carson Beck for not second guessing himself and just tucking and running the ball and getting what he needed to, and making a play. Gunnar Stockton has every bit of that ability as well. So I definitely do. I don't want to use the term stopping the Georgia offense. You probably use the correct term. Try to contain it as much as you can. Try to limit explosive plays, and especially in the run game, the last thing you want to do is have a habit of giving up runs that are 6 yards or more. You want to limit that as much as possible. To put the game on Gunnar Stockton's shoulders, and that's not to say that they disregard his passing ability, but they also understand that in passing situations, if they were to come out, in a certain defense and cause Stockton to have to audible, again, if the crowd's involved, that can make that very difficult, versus where if the run game is having a successful day, there's a lot less of a chance of that happening versus them just continue to pound the ball down Tennessee's throat.
Yeah, man. I mean, and they're very talented when it comes to running the ball in general. This is something that everyone's talked about. Man, those those players they put into the NFL is ridiculous, and there's a reason those running backs go to the NFL. They're among the best in the nation when it comes to running the football. And the reason I really touched on it too, just to elaborate more on what I was saying, the reason I touched on Stockton running the ball is when you look at Stockton, like, yeah, he's been in that system for quite some time. I believe this is his 3rd or 4th season maybe in the system. But this is actually his first season as a starter. So there's still things to learn. He hasn't played inside an atmosphere like, Neyland Stadium on the road and 102,000 screaming fans. You know how that stadium's going to be. And that stadium very well could be impactful. But, you mentioning the stadium was very intriguing because that leads to our next point, because that's something that I definitely want to talk about. It being inside Neyland Stadium and obviously with College game day and things that come with that. I mean, that's got to be something that's impactful and having the Neyland effect, the Checker Neyland effect, and all of these things that are in play. It's just something that's very intriguing to me. So how impactful can the stadium be in this game?
Very impactful. For one, you touched on College game day, being there, everybody's got their eyes on this game. Needless to say, the atmosphere is going to be electric, and it's going to be that way very early in the day. For people that are around on campus, I'm sure if you're walking around at 11, 12 o'clock, you're going to feel the intensity that's in the air. That's just something that's going to happen. How impactful can the stadium be? We've all heard the comments, and the quotes from former players, of opposing teams, that have played inside Neyland Stadium. It was Oklahoma center that, gave the quote about turning back to his quarterback and telling him that the ball was moving. Um, I happened to actually be in the stadium during that game, and I can't confirm the story. I wasn't out there with him to see the ball moving, but I felt a concrete structure vibrating. So I do not doubt at all that he literally saw the ball moving. And the thing is, it's going to be very, very hostile, obviously at the beginning of the game. One thing for Georgia, is just keep everything in front of you, not try to give them tips, but, for them, the last thing they want is it for a mental mistake and Tennessee go up, whether it's by 3, by 7, or 10. If they put points on the board first, and or they're up, 7, 10 points, they're going to give that crowd a reason, to be involved in the game. And if they give them a reason to be involved in the game, that stadium has the capability of taking the game over. I'm almost sure you could probably go to YouTube and just search, penalties that were forced during a game that was a result, of the crowd noise. We've seen quite a few of those last year, quarterbacks that they can't hear, they can't audible, and it's a factor. People can downplay it and say, well, it's like that everywhere. And for in most parts, it probably is. Excuse me, but the difference being is when you're not at home, you don't get to go out and run your offense and hear crickets. You get to go out there and hear, on any given Saturday in the SEC, roughly anywhere of 70,000 plus, going crazy, and Neyland is one of those that they hold a lot of people, and by the design and structure of the stadium itself, it traps the noise on the field like it's a bowl, and it's deafening. Um, I know I wouldn't want to be trying to call out a cadence and have that and blowing in my ear from all angles. Like there's nothing you can do, no matter which side you turn. The noise is just swarming you. Um, so for Georgia, just keep everything in front of them. Don't let things get out of hand early, because that's the big thing. Because it's not that I'm going to sit here and say that Gunner Stockton can't handle it, but that's just one of those experiences that until you're there and you actually go through it, it's hard to prepare for. You can play a Rocky Top out of a speaker 5,000 times during a week. There's nothing that's going to get you ready for roughly 100,000 screaming fans that do not like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's frustrating for quarterbacks. It's frustrating for offenses, but it's just as frustrating, I guess, for me in a sense right here, just trying to even explain it because it's hard to put, a pinpoint description of how it is. It's just something you have to experience or have to see. I'm sure even just watching from home, the people who's listening today, I'm sure they're going to be watching the football game, and I'm sure you're gonna notice very quickly how this atmosphere is. And this is something that once again we got to talk about with Stockton. Stockton is not a guy that has seen this type of atmosphere so far in his time at Georgia. He's been under Carson Beck for at least 2 years that I know of. So it's something he's seen in the past, but he hasn't experienced as a starter, which is entirely different because
Exactly.
you have to be able to go out there, you have to be able to execute, but it's quite hard to go out there and execute when it comes to not being able to hear what you need to do or say what you need to say in a fashion of which your teammates are going to be able to understand. And it's quite intriguing the fact that you mentioned that story of the ball moving, because whether it moved or didn't, what really speaks here in this situation is the fact that it's believable. So
Yeah.
if that says anything, at the minimum we know it's believable. So I mean that's just, it's definitely something that's going to play a factor. And I feel like all these extra things like college game day coming to town, these guys and girls, they're going to be rowdy before
Very
kickoff,
much so.
way before way before kickoff. probably before most people are waking up, they're going to be rowdy. So
I can
that's
give you another story on that. Because I've attended a few games in the stands and on the field alike, and so like you said, up early. I've showed up to games. Actually, I can tell you exactly what game it was. I don't remember the year right away, but Cincinnati came into Neyland when Butch Jones was still their head coach, and Tennessee thumped them. Uh, they were rowdy for that game. When I parked on campus, there were people, and this is at like, I don't know, roughly between 9:30 and 11 o'clock in the morning. And I remember walking past houses and people were playing beer pong. And I looked over at a friend of mine. I said, "No, the real question is, did they just wake up and they're playing, or are they still playing from the night before?" Because how they looked, it looked like they had a rough night. I'm like, I don't know if they slept in those clothes or they've been out here playing all night and just haven't passed out or ran out of booze or whatever. Um, but away from that one, again, I've been to Neyland a few other times, and it's just electric. Yeah, and you said it best. I mean, it's hard to put in words. Like until you experience it, there's really nothing anybody can say. And that's not to discredit other venues. Tuscaloosa, Bryant Denny Stadium is a loud place. In my honest opinion, in my times, seeing other venues, I would have to say that they're probably second behind Neyland. And if they held as many people as Neyland did, they would probably give them a run for their money. But I've been in Knoxville, and to me, the difference is in some of these games, you hear the flashes of the noise. Those at times, if this stadium really gets behind it and this team gives them a reason to get involved, that noise radiance will sustain for long periods of times, and instead of being something that gradually grows for about 5 seconds and dies off, you'll just hear a constant buzz for about 15 seconds. It's truly an insane experience for anybody that's a college football fan, whether you're a Tennessee fan or not. If you ever have the opportunity to go cover or to go watch a game inside Neyland, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely and just to touch on it, and this is definitely something, the trash talking is going on all over social media, but the Georgia fans, they're like, well, we're used to this noise. Well, yeah, I'm sure you are for home games, but it's very different when you're on the road and that noise isn't for you, it's against you.
Well, and
But
also
yeah,
another thing to think about in the past, Georgia's had teams where they were just so talented and deep at various positions. They were able to just truly out athlete Tennessee, and go in with a game plan to where that noise truly didn't matter. Because we know in those situations, were those few years where Georgia was just that much better than Tennessee, it didn't take them long to go up, 14 or 17 points. And when Georgia would do that early, you take that crowd out of the equation. And that's my thing with this year. With it, as we touched on it being a more winnable game this year, sure, it could happen. I just don't see on paper where we could be sitting here closing out the last 4 minutes of the first quarter and it's already 17-0 Georgia. It could happen, but I just don't think that straight up that happens without some crazy turnover or something of that nature. So this year I don't think that Georgia just absolutely has the roster that could just straight take the crowd out. Maybe they do. They'll have to prove that. It's still a lot of questions for both of these teams. But if that's something this Georgia team can do, more power to them, and that'll be a different level of respect that everybody has to give them.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, years past you could almost expect it, but this year it's definitely not the favorable pick that they're going to go up that early. Maybe they're up early, but they're not going to go up that big. I would almost, I'd almost say you could bet on that one. But yeah, I mean that's definitely something that's going to play a factor. I mean, Neyland's it's always loud. It doesn't matter who comes to town. But especially when those Bulldogs from Athens come to town, you can expect them to show up.
Oh yeah, they'll have
Well,
everybody's attention that day.
oh, yeah, absolutely. But to wrap up the show, we want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening. feel free to jump in and leave us a comment in the comment section. Let us all know how you are feeling, maybe interact with someone or somebody. You can find us on multiple different social medias. You can find us on Facebook just by looking up Vols on SI. You can find us on our X page, which is at Vols on SI. Instagram's a little bit different. You can find us at Vols _on _SI. And of course, you watching here on YouTube, you know where you can find us. And yeah, so this is definitely something that will be very key to watch. Make sure to also tune into every little bit of the news coming in for Saturday as we cover the game as well, writing for Vols on SI, as well as we will also provide our score predictions as well as bold takes that we have. So make sure to stay tuned to that, and thank you.